The great hall of Blackthorn Citadel echoed with the cruel laughter of nobles as Elara Voss was dragged forward by two guards, her bare feet scraping against cold stone. The scent of pine smoke and old blood hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of fear that clung to her skin. At 28, she had long since learned that beauty was a currency she would never possess. Deep silver scars ran from her left shoulder down across her collarbone and arm marks from the night her own pack had tried to burn the cursed servant girl alive when she was only 14. Tonight, those scars were on full display. The thin grey dress they had forced her into did nothing to hide them. King Vortigern, the Alpha King of the Eastern Realms, sat upon his obsidian throne, his golden eyes cold with indifference as he looked down at her. Behold the oath-bound servant who dares carry the blood of traitors. Vortigern's voice rang out, smooth and merciless. She has no wolf, no scent worth claiming. Even the moon turns away from her. A wave of mocking laughter swept through the court. Elara kept her head slightly bowed, but her hands remained steady at her sides. She had served in these halls for 12 years, cleaning the blood from their floors after battles, tending wounds they pretended never existed, and swallowing every insult in silence. Yet, tonight, something inside her chest burned hotter than the flames that had once scarred her flesh. She was not just being humiliated. She was being sold. To seal the peace between our realms, Vortigern continued, gesturing lazily toward the tall, shadowed figure standing at the end of the hall. I offer this broken girl as tribute to King Draven of the Northern Pax. Take her. Use her as you will. She is nothing to us. Ilara's breath caught. She slowly lifted her gaze toward the man who had come to claim her. King Draven stood like a storm-given form, taller than any wolf in the hall, with midnight hair streaked with silver and eyes the color of winter frost. A heavy black cloak trimmed with white wolf fur draped over broad shoulders. Power radiated from him, ancient and heavy, pressing against her skin like invisible chains. For one long moment, those frost-colored eyes locked onto hers, not with pity, not with disgust, with something quieter, something searching. Elara felt it then, a strange, faint warmth blooming beneath the worst of her scars, as if her blood remembered something her mind had long forgotten. She quickly looked away, clenching her jaw. She would not let them see her tremble. Not here, not in front of the man who had just traded her life to buy peace for his kingdom. When the guards shoved her forward, she stumbled but caught herself. Instead of lowering her head further, Elara straightened her spine and took one deliberate step toward King Draven on her own. It was a small act, quiet, defiant, but it was hers. I accept my fate, she said, her voice low but clear enough for the nearest nobles to hear. But I walk to it with my own feet. A ripple of surprise moved through the court. Vortigern's uncle, Lord Cassian, the true power behind the throne, narrowed his eyes with clear displeasure. Draven said nothing at first. He simply extended one gloved hand. When Elara placed her scarred fingers into his palm, a faint spark passed between them, so brief she might have imagined it. Yet, for the first time in years, the constant hollow ache inside her chest eased, just a little. As Draven turned to lead her from the hall, Elara glanced back once at the man who had cast her away. King Vortigern was already looking elsewhere, bored with the transaction. She did not know then that the Northern King had not come for a weak servant, nor did she know that the moment her blood touched his skin, every wolf in his delegation had felt the ancient call stir beneath their ribs, the lost Empress's blood awakening after decades of silence. The heavy oak doors of Blackthorn Citadel closed behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing. Outside, snow fell softly under a blood moon. Elara walked beside the enemy king, her heart pounding with both terror and a strange, impossible spark of hope. She had been sold like cattle, but something ancient in the winter wind seemed to whisper that the real story had only just begun. The journey north stretched across frozen ridges and whispering pine forests, each mile carving deeper into the hollow place inside Elara's chest. She rode in silence, the thin cloak barely shielding her from the cutting wind. Every jolt of the saddle sent fresh pain through the old scars along her shoulder and collarbone scars that had never truly healed. 12 years ago, they had tied her to a post and set the flames upon her because the pack healer claimed her blood carried a dead wolf. The fire had eaten her skin while the other servants watched. No one had spoken for her. Not even the boy she once thought might care. Now the Alpha King had sold her the same way one might discard a chipped bowl. Broken. Useless. The words still rang in her ears. King Draven rode ahead, a dark silhouette against the snow. He had not spoken to her in 2 days. Elara told herself she preferred the silence. Yet when his frost-colored eyes occasionally flicked back toward her, something dangerous stirred beneath her ribs, a treacherous warmth that frightened her more than the cold. On the 3rd night, they camped in a sheltered valley. While the wolves built the fire, Elara moved to help, her scarred hands reaching for a heavy bundle of firewood. The motion pulled her sleeve back, exposing the worst of the silver-white burns. A large hand suddenly closed around her wrist, not rough, but firm enough to stop her. Draven stood close, closer than he had ever been. The firelight danced across his sharp features as he stared at the ruined skin beneath his fingers. For a heartbeat, his thumb brushed lightly over the edge of one scar, almost unconsciously. Elara's breath hitched. The touch burned in a way the flames never had. Heat bloomed from that single point of contact, spreading through her chest like something long buried was trying to wake. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to lean in. Both urges terrified her. "You flinch every time someone looks at these," Draven said, voice low. "Yet you still carry wood like a servant." "Because that is what I am," she whispered, her voice cracking despite herself. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not in front of any of them. 12 years of being reminded I should have died in those flames. 12 years of hearing I am nothing, and now your ally simply gave me away, like I was never even alive. The words tasted like blood in her mouth. She had not meant to say so much. Draven's grip loosened, but he did not release her. His thumb moved again, slower this time, tracing the line of scar tissue with a gentleness that felt completely at odds with the ruthless king everyone feared. For the first time, his guarded expression fractured. Something raw and conflicted flickered in those winter eyes. "You are not what they say you are," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "I felt it the moment your blood touched mine in the hall, and it terrifies me." Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. She searched his face, mistrust warring with a desperate, aching curiosity. Who was this man who looked at her scars not with disgust, but with recognition? Why did his touch make the hollow place inside her feel less empty? She gently pulled her wrist free, not in anger, but in self-preservation. "Do not offer me kindness, King Draven. I have learned it always comes with a price." Draven's jaw tightened. He stepped back, but the distance felt heavier than before. "Perhaps," he said, "but some prices are worth paying." Elara turned away, walking toward the edge of the firelight. Her hands trembled as she wrapped her arms around herself. The wind howled through the pines, carrying distant howls that sounded almost like answers to questions she did not dare ask. Behind her, Draven remained motionless, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She did not know that Lord Cassian's spies had already slipped away from the Eastern Court, carrying urgent messages. Nor did she know that the ancient blood in her veins had begun to call to the wolves of the north softly at first, but growing stronger with every mile they traveled. As the blood moon climbed higher, one of Draven's senior wolves approached him, voice hushed and uneasy. "My king," the men are whispering. "They say she feels like home." Draven did not reply, but his frost-colored eyes stayed fixed on Elara's scarred silhouette against the snow, and for the first time in many years, the weight of prophecy felt heavier than the crown upon his head. The northern wind cut sharper with every passing mile, carrying the scent of pine and distant ice. Elara's body ached from long hours in the saddle, but it was the quiet moments that unsettled her most. When Draven rode beside her without speaking, when his gaze lingered a second too long on the exposed line of her scarred shoulder, her pulse would quicken, her scarred skin tingling as if remembering heat. She hated how aware she had become of him, the steady rise and fall of his chest, the way his gloved fingers flexed on the reins. One afternoon, as they crossed a narrow ridge, her mare slipped on ice. Elara gripped the saddle, heart lurching. Draven was there instantly, one strong arm wrapping around her waist to steady her. For a heartbeat, her back pressed against his chest. The warmth of him seeped through layers of wool and fur, chasing away the cold that lived inside her bones. She felt the rapid beat of his heart against her spine, and realized her own was racing to match it. Neither of them spoke. He released her slowly, almost reluctantly, and the absence of his touch left her colder than the wind. That night the storm drove them into an old stone watchtower. While the men tended the horses, Elara moved to gather extra wood. Her fingers brushed against one of the ancient standing stones near the entrance. A strange vibration passed through her palm like a distant heartbeat. She pulled back quickly, rubbing her hand, but the sensation lingered beneath her scars. Later, inside the dim tower, she prepared her pallet near the small hearth. Draven entered, snow dusting his dark cloak. He watched her struggle to reach a high shelf and stepped close without asking. His body brushed hers as he lifted the blankets down. The contact sent heat rushing up her neck. She turned, intending to thank him, but the words caught when she saw the look in his eyes, raw, conflicted, almost hungry. "You keep watching me," she said softly, voice barely above the crackling fire. Draven's jaw tightened. "You are not what I expected to receive." Elara's throat tightened. Memories flooded back, the smell of burning flesh, the laughter of the pack as flames licked her skin at 14, the years of being called worthless, empty, dead inside. Her hands curled into fists. "I was 14 when they said my wolf was dead, that I deserved the fire. 12 years of being reminded every day that I should not exist." Her voice wavered. "And now I am sold again, passed from one king to another like broken goods." Draven's hand rose, hesitating, then gently rested on her scarred shoulder. His thumb traced the edge of the old burn, careful, almost reverent. Elara's breath shuddered. The simple touch undid something in her. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She would not break in front of him. "I have carried enough burdens," she said, stepping back. Though every part of her wanted to lean closer. "I will serve during this journey. I will not cause trouble. But do not ask me to hope. I cannot survive another disappointment." Draven's frost-colored eyes darkened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "My kingdom is fracturing. The old prophecy says my mate will either save it or bring it to ruin. Every time I look at you, I feel the weight of that warning." The air between them grew thick. Elara's heart hammered so hard she felt dizzy. She wanted to believe the pull between them was real. She feared it would destroy her. A sudden, unnatural silence fell over the tower. One of Draven's senior guards burst in, face ashen. "My king, the standing stones on the ridge. They are glowing." Draven's gaze snapped to Elara. Beneath the sleeve she had pulled down earlier, the silver lines of her scars began to shimmer with soft moonlight. The glow was faint but unmistakable, pulsing in time with the distant howl that rose from the forest, ancient, powerful, and calling directly to her blood. Elara clutched her arm, fear and a terrifying spark of recognition twisting inside her chest. She looked up at Draven, her voice barely a whisper. "What is happening to me?" Outside, the blood moon burned brighter, and the wolves of the north began to stir with restless energy, as if something long lost had finally begun to wake. The howl lingered in the air like a vow, ancient and undeniable. Elara clutched her arm tighter, feeling the silver lines beneath her skin pulse with a life of their own. The faint glow had spread, illuminating the delicate scars in soft moonlight, even through the fabric of her sleeve. Fear coiled cold and sharp in her stomach. This was not a gift. This was something waking that had been buried for a reason. Draven moved first, his hand closing around her wrist with gentle but unbreakable strength. "Everyone out," he commanded, voice low and edged with authority. The guards hesitated only a moment before filing from the tower, leaving the two of them alone with the crackling hearth and the distant howl that refused to fade. Elara pulled against his hold, not violently, but with quiet determination. "Let me go. Whatever this is, it is not safe for you. For any of you." Draven did not release her. Instead, he turned her hand palm up, pushing the sleeve higher. The silver marks shimmered brighter under his gaze. His thumb brushed across them again, and this time the contact sent a wave of warmth flooding through her veins, chasing away the terror for one treacherous second before it crashed back harder. "You are afraid," he said, his frost-colored eyes searching hers. "Good. Fear keeps us alive, but you will not face this alone." Elara's breath came shallow. The vibration she had felt at the standing stone earlier now thrummed deeper, like a second heartbeat beneath her own. Memories she had never lived flickered at the edges of her mind, vast forests under twin moons. A woman with the same silver scars standing tall before kneeling wolves, the taste of ancient power on her tongue. She shoved them down, heart pounding with raw panic. "I do not want this," she whispered fiercely. "I have spent my life trying to be invisible. Small, safe, and now something inside me is trying to tear its way out." Her free hand rose to press against her chest, where the warmth was blooming into something almost painful. "What if it destroys everything it touches? What if I am the curse they always said I was?" Draven's expression tightened. For the first time, she saw real conflict in the powerful king. The man who had accepted her as tribute now looked at her as though she might slip through his fingers like winter mist. He stepped closer, his tall frame shielding her from the cold air seeping through the tower walls. "Then we face it together," he said, voice rough. "But first, you must decide, Elara. Will you run from what you are, or will you let me stand with you while it awakens?" The choice hung between them, heavy and terrifying. Elara looked down at her glowing scars, then up at the man who had bought her like property, yet now offered her something far more dangerous understanding. Her throat tightened. She had spent 12 years surviving by staying silent, by enduring. Tonight, something inside her refused to shrink back. She made her decision. "I will not run," she said, voice trembling but clear. "But if this power hurts you or your people, I will ask you to end it myself. That is my condition." Draven's eyes flashed with something fierce and protective. He nodded once, then gently released her wrist only to take her scarred hand fully in his. The moment their palms pressed together, the glow intensified. A soft silver light spilled between their fingers, spreading across the stone floor of the tower like liquid moonlight. Outside, the distant howl grew louder, closer. Multiple voices joined it, not just wolves, but something deeper, older, answering the call in her blood. The standing stones on the ridge flared brighter, visible even through the narrow tower windows. Elara gasped as a rush of images flooded her mind. A golden crown of ash and moonlight, wolves of every pack lowering their heads, a throne that had been empty for generations. The awakening was no longer gentle. It burned through her, painful and beautiful, forcing her to feel every year of rejection, every scar, every moment she had been told she was nothing. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. She did not pull away from Draven. Instead, her fingers tightened around his, drawing strength from the steady warmth of his hand. "I am afraid," she admitted, voice breaking. "But I am also tired of being afraid." Draven lifted his other hand to brush a tear from her cheek with startling gentleness. The gesture undid her more than any prophecy or glowing scar ever could. For one fragile moment, the feared king of the north looked at her not as tribute, not as a threat, but as something precious he was terrified of losing. The tower doors suddenly burst open. One of Draven's commanders stood there, breathing hard, eyes wide with alarm. "My king!" Riders from the eastern court approach under a white banner. Lord Cassian himself leads them. He demands the return of the servant girl, claiming she carries dangerous forbidden blood that could unravel the peace treaty. Draven's body went rigid. His hand remained locked with Elara's as the silver light between them continued to pulse, brighter now, refusing to be hidden. Elara met his eyes, fear and newfound strength warring inside her chest. The awakening had begun, and the world outside these stone walls was already moving to crush it before it could fully rise. The silver light between their joined hands pulsed like a living thing, warm and insistent. Elara's breath came in shallow waves as the ancient power continued to unfurl inside her chest, pressing against old wounds she had carried for so long. She should have pulled away. Instead, she held Draven's hand tighter, her scarred fingers trembling against his steady strength. Lord Cassian's riders were coming. The peace treaty, the very reason she had been sold, was now in danger because of her, because of whatever was awakening in her blood. "I will not let them take you," Draven said, his voice low and fierce. He did not release her hand. If anything, he drew her closer until only a breath separated them. His free hand rose to cup the side of her face, thumb brushing gently beneath her eye, where tears had dried. The touch was so careful, so unexpectedly tender, that Elara felt something deep inside her crack open. For 12 years she had been invisible, unwanted, a thing to be used and discarded. Now this powerful king, this man who could crush kingdoms with a word, looked at her as though she were the only thing in the world worth protecting. "I am not worth starting another war over," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. Her free hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, rapid beat beneath her palm. "I have only ever brought pain to those around me." Draven's forehead rested gently against hers. The contact sent a shiver through her entire body. "You have brought light to a kingdom that has known only winter," he murmured. "I felt it the moment you touched my hand in Blackthorn. I tried to deny it. I told myself you were simply a political tool. But every night on this journey, watching you endure the cold without complaint, watching you choose dignity when you could have chosen despair, you have undone me, Elara." Her heart ached with a longing so sharp it hurt. She wanted to believe him, wanted to sink into the safety of his arms and let the warmth chase away every memory of fire and rejection. But fear still gripped her, the fear of hoping, only to be thrown away again. She made her choice. Slowly, deliberately, she rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his. It was not a kiss of passion, but one of quiet surrender and aching need. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she poured into that kiss every unspoken fear, every hidden longing, every fragile piece of herself she had guarded for so long. Draven froze for half a heartbeat, then responded with a low sound in his throat. His arms came around her, careful of her scars, yet strong enough to make her feel truly held. The kiss deepened, slow and reverent, filled with all the words neither of them had dared speak. When they finally parted, both were breathing harder, foreheads still touching. "I choose to stay," Elara said softly, her voice steady despite the tears. "Not because I was sold, not because of any treaty, but because for the first time I want to see what I might become with you." Draven's eyes burned with something fierce and protective. His hand slid to the back of her neck, holding her close. Then we face this together. Whatever you are, whatever power sleeps in your blood, it will not face the world alone. The silver glow between them had softened, but it had not disappeared. It now seemed to pulse gently in time with both their heartbeats, as if recognizing the fragile bond forming between them. Outside, the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Lord Cassian had arrived. Draven released her only long enough to drape his heavy black cloak around her shoulders, the fur lining still warm from his body. He took her hand once more and led her toward the tower entrance. The wolves outside had formed a protective line, their postures alert and uneasy. Lord Cassian sat upon a fine horse at the head of 20 Eastern riders. His eyes narrowed the moment they landed on Elara, noting the king's cloak around her and the way Draven held her hand openly. "So," Cassian called out, voice smooth with false concern, "the servant girl has already bewitched the Northern King. How convenient. My nephew, King Vortigern, demands her immediate return. She carries forbidden blood. Blood that threatens the peace we have only just bought with her worthless life." Elara felt the old shame rise, but this time she did not lower her head. She stood taller beside Draven, her scarred hand steady in his. Draven's voice rang out, cold and commanding. "She is no longer your concern. The tribute has been accepted. The peace holds." Cassian smiled thinly. "Does it? Or has the girl already begun her destruction? Look at her, Draven. Even now her cursed marks glow. She is no simple servant. She is a threat to both our thrones." The silver light beneath Elara's skin flared brighter at his words, as if angered. Several of Draven's wolves growled low, stepping forward. The air grew thick with tension. Elara squeezed Draven's hand, her decision burning clear in her heart. She would not hide anymore. She stepped forward, voice quiet but carrying across the snow. "If I am a threat, then let the truth decide. I will not run. Not from you, not from anyone." As she spoke, the ancient howl rose again from the forest, louder, closer, and unmistakably answering her. The standing stones on the ridge blazed with silver fire. Lord Cassian's face paled. For the first time, real fear flickered in his eyes. Draven stood beside her, tall and unyielding, but Elara could feel the weight of prophecy and politics pressing down on him. The choice he had just made to stand with her might cost him everything, and yet, in that moment, with her hand in his and the ancient power stirring in her blood, Elara felt something she had not felt in 12 long years. She felt alive. The silver light continued to pulse beneath Elara's skin as Lord Cassian's words hung in the frozen air like a blade. She felt the old rage stirring, not the hot, reckless kind, but something deeper, colder, born from 12 years of silent endurance. The kind of rage that had kept her alive when they tied her to the post and set her on fire. Draven's hand tightened around hers, but she could feel the tension radiating through his body. The weight of 2 kingdoms pressed upon his shoulders. Peace or her. Treaty or truth. Lord Cassian dismounted slowly, his smile thin and venomous. "My king, I urge you to see reason. This girl is no ordinary servant. She carries the forbidden blood of the lost Empress blood that once nearly tore our realms apart. King Vortigern offers generous compensation if you return her immediately, before she awakens something none of us can control." Elara's scars burned hotter. The silver glow flared, casting eerie light across the snow. Several of Draven's wolves lowered their heads instinctively, ears flattening, while others growled in confusion. The ancient call in her blood surged, demanding recognition. She stepped forward before Draven could speak, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I am standing right here. Speak to me if you wish to accuse me." Cassian's eyes narrowed with contempt. "You were sold as tribute, girl. Know your place." "My place? The words ignited something fierce in her chest. Elara lifted her scarred arm, letting the silver light spill openly across the clearing. My place was on a burning post at 14, while your kind laughed. My place was 12 years of cleaning blood from floors and swallowing every insult so I could survive. And now you want to drag me back to be silenced again? Her voice rose, raw and trembling with years of suppressed pain. I will not go quietly this time. Draven moved to stand beside her, but Cassian raised a hand, signaling his riders. King Draven, the treaty is clear. If the tribute proves dangerous, she must be returned. Your own council will not support you if you break peace for a scarred servant. The betrayal cut deep. Elara felt Draven stiffen. She looked up at him, searching his face. For one terrible moment, she saw the conflict there, duty to his people warring with the fragile bond growing between them. The same man who had held her so tenderly moments ago now stood torn. Her heart twisted painfully. Draven, she whispered, using his name for the first time without title. If you need to send me back to keep your kingdom safe, I will understand. The words tasted like ash, but she meant them. She would not force him to choose her over everything he had built. Not when she had only just begun to hope. Draven's jaw clenched so tightly she feared it might break. His frost-colored eyes burned with fury, not at her, but at the situation. At Cassian. At the cruel chains of duty. He opened his mouth to speak. Before he could, Cassian made his move. "Caesar!" he ordered sharply. Two of his riders lunged forward with silver chains meant to suppress forbidden blood. Elara reacted on pure instinct. She raised her scarred hands, and the silver light exploded outward in a brilliant wave. The riders were thrown back, not harmed, but stunned. The ancient howl rose again from the forest. Closer than ever, rage, pure, burning rage flooded through her. "I am not a thing to be seized," she cried, voice breaking with the weight of every humiliation she had endured. "I was burned. I was rejected. I was sold like cattle. And I will not be chained again." Draven stepped in front of her protectively, drawing his sword in one fluid motion. "She stays," he declared, voice ringing with alpha command. "The tribute is mine. The peace holds only if you accept that." But Cassian smiled, cold and knowing. "Then you have chosen her over peace, King Draven. My nephew will see this as betrayal. And when war returns to your borders, remember it was this cursed girl who brought it." The words struck Elara like a physical blow. She had done this. By awakening, by daring to hope, by choosing to stay, she had become the reason peace might shatter. Tears burned in her eyes as she looked at Draven. The man who had just chosen her publicly now carried the heavy cost across his shoulders. She could see the fear in his eyes, not of her, but of what this choice might cost his people. In that moment, the rage inside her twisted into something sharper. Betrayal of the fragile hope she had only just allowed herself to feel. She pulled her hand from Draven's grasp, stepping back. Her voice was quiet, broken. "I told you I would not let you destroy everything for me." Before he could respond, the ground trembled. From the tree line, massive wolves with silver-streaked fur emerged, not Draven's pack, but older, wilder beasts answering the call in her blood. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, lowering their great heads not to Draven, but to her. The truth was no longer hidden. Elara stood trembling between the man who had chosen her and the kingdom she might destroy. The silver light in her scars burned brighter, reflecting in Draven's conflicted eyes. She had made her choice to stay. Now she wondered if that choice would cost them everything. The silver-streaked wolves emerged from the tree line like ghosts of legend, their eyes glowing with ancient moonlight. They did not growl. They did not threaten. They simply knelt one by one, lowering their massive heads toward Elara. The sight sent a wave of shock through every wolf present. Elara stood frozen, her scarred hand still glowing with soft silver fire. The power inside her no longer felt like something foreign. It felt like coming home after 12 years of exile. Yet the weight of it terrified her. Lord Cassian's face twisted with fury and fear. "Abomination!" he spat. "She is the lost Empress's blood, the very blood your ancestors spilled to seize the throne. King Draven, if you do not hand her over now, you will bring ruin upon us all." The words struck Elara like a fresh brand. She had always known she was unwanted, but to hear she carried the blood of a stolen throne, that her very existence threatened peace, made something inside her finally snap. She stepped forward, pulling her hand from Draven's grasp. Her voice rang clear across the snow-covered clearing, stronger than she had ever heard it. Enough. The single word carried power. The kneeling wolves rose slightly, ears pricked. Even the wind seemed to quiet. Elara looked at Cassian, then at the riders behind him, and finally at Draven. Her heart pounded with a mixture of terror and raw, liberating strength. For the first time in her life, she was not shrinking. She was choosing. "I am not your tribute anymore," she said, her voice trembling with emotion but unwavering. "I was burned at 14 for a crime I did not commit. I was sold like cattle to buy your peace. And now you dare come here and call me abomination?" The silver light in her scars flared brighter. The ancient wolves howled in unison, a sound so deep it vibrated through the stones themselves. Elara felt the power surge through her, not destructive, but awakening. Memories that were not her own flooded her mind. A woman with silver scars, wearing a crown of ash and moonlight, standing before thousands of kneeling wolves from every realm. She raised her scarred arm. The glow intensified until it bathed the entire clearing in ethereal light. "I am Elara Voss," she declared, tears streaming down her face. "Daughter of the lost Wolf Empress, the blood you tried to erase, the blood you feared." A collective gasp rose from both eastern and northern wolves. Several of Draven's men dropped to one knee instinctively. Even Lord Cassian's riders looked shaken, their horses shifting uneasily. Draven stood beside her, his expression a storm of shock, pride, and fierce protectiveness. But Elara could see the heavy cost in his eyes. Choosing her publicly had just shattered the fragile peace. Cassian laughed bitterly, though fear edged his voice. "You see, King Draven, she admits it. She will destroy everything. Hand her over before it is too late." Elara turned to Draven. Her heart ached as she spoke her next words, the hardest decision she had ever made. "If my presence brings war to your kingdom," she said softly, voice breaking, "then send me away. I will go. I will not let you lose everything you have protected because of me." The words hurt more than any flame ever had. She had finally found someone who saw her, who chose her. And now she was offering to walk away to protect him. Draven's eyes blazed. In one powerful motion, he pulled her against his chest, one arm wrapping around her waist, the other cradling the back of her head. Right there, in front of both delegations, in front of the ancient wolves and the glowing stones, he kissed her. Not gently this time. It was a kiss filled with desperation, possession, and raw devotion. A public declaration louder than any words. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, his voice rough with emotion. "I will not send you away," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You are not a threat. You are the missing piece this broken world has waited for. If peace requires sacrificing you, then let the peace burn." The words sent a ripple of shock through the clearing. Several of Draven's commanders looked stunned. Lord Cassian's face turned purple with rage. "You fool," Cassian snarled. "You would choose this cursed woman over your own people." Draven's voice became ice. "She is my people now." Elara clung to him, overwhelmed. The silver light around her stabilized, no longer wild but steady, a quiet, powerful glow that seemed to soothe rather than threaten. The ancient wolves howled again, this time in clear approval. For the first time in her life, Elara felt seen, truly seen, not as a scarred servant, not as a broken thing, but as someone worthy of being chosen, even at great cost. Yet as Draven held her close, she felt the weight of what he had just done. He had publicly defied his ally. He had chosen her over peace. The war that had been avoided by selling her was now threatening to return stronger than before. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes, her voice barely a whisper only he could hear. "What have we done?" Draven's arms tightened around her. "What we should have done from the beginning." In the distance, horns sounded from the south. Eastern reinforcements were already moving. The dramatic reveal had come. The power had awakened, and the world was watching. Elara stood empowered in the arms of the Northern King, but the price of that empowerment was only just beginning to reveal itself. The blood moon hung low and swollen over the northern skies as the first reports arrived. Messengers on exhausted horses brought word that King Vortigern had declared the treaty broken. Eastern armies were already mobilizing along the border. War, the very thing Draven had tried to prevent by accepting her as tribute, was now marching because he had chosen her. Elara stood on the watchtower's battlements, the cold wind tearing at Draven's cloak around her shoulders. The silver light in her scars had dimmed to a soft glow, but it no longer brought comfort. It felt like a brand marking her as the cause of coming bloodshed. She gripped the stone parapet until her scarred fingers ached, staring out at the dark horizon. "I should have let them take me," she whispered into the wind. Draven appeared behind her, his tall frame blocking the worst of the gale. He did not speak at first. He simply wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. For a long moment, they stood like that two souls caught between awakening power and the threat of war. "You would have died there," he said finally, voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper. "Or worse, Cassian would have ensured it." Elara turned in his arms, looking up at him. Tears she could no longer hold back froze on her lashes. "And how many of your people will die now because of me? Because I was selfish enough to want to stay? To want you?" The despair hit her like a physical blow. All the years of being told she was worthless suddenly felt true again. She had survived fire, only to become the spark that would burn entire kingdoms. Her hands trembled as she pressed them against Draven's chest. "I am the curse they always feared," she choked out. "The blood they tried to erase. Every time someone kneels to me, another soldier will bleed on some distant battlefield. How can I live with that?" Draven's arms tightened. She felt him tremble not from cold, but from the weight he carried. The king who had always protected his realm was now torn between love and duty. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her frozen tears. "I chose you knowing the cost," he said, voice breaking, "and I would choose you again. But gods help me, Elara. I am terrified that the prophecy was right, that having you will destroy everything I swore to protect." The raw honesty in his voice shattered what remained of her strength. She buried her face in his chest and wept deep, wrenching sobs that had been locked inside her for 12 long years. She cried for the girl who burned, for the woman who was sold, for the hope she had dared to feel, only to watch it threaten everything. Draven held her through it all, his own eyes glistening in the moonlight. The feared Northern King stood silent as the woman he loved broke in his arms. When her tears finally slowed, Elara pulled back slightly. Her voice was hoarse but resolute. "Then I must do something," she said. "I will not stand by while others die for me. If this power is truly mine, then I will use it. Not to destroy, but to protect." She stepped away from him and walked to the edge of the battlements. The ancient wolves that had answered her call still lingered at the tree line, watching, Elara raised her scarred hands toward the blood moon. The silver light flared once more, stronger than before. A wave of warmth spread outward, carrying with it a call older than any kingdom. The wolves answered. Dozens more emerged from the forest, their eyes glowing with the same silver light. They did not kneel this time. They stood with her. Draven watched in awe and quiet fear. "What are you doing?" "Offering them a choice," Elara replied. "Just as you offered me one." But even as hope flickered fragile and precious, darker news arrived. Another rider galloped into the clearing, bloodied and half-frozen. "My king! The eastern forces have crossed the river. They march under the banner of total war. Lord Cassian has convinced Vortigern that the only way to end the threat is to kill the Empress's daughter before her power fully awakens." Despair crashed over Elara again. She staggered, and Draven caught her. The hope that had begun to bloom felt crushed beneath the weight of reality. She had found her power, found love, only for both to become weapons turned against the man she was falling for. "I cannot watch you lose everything," she whispered against his chest, voice breaking once more. "Not for me." Draven tilted her chin up, his frost-colored eyes burning with fierce determination despite the shadows of fear. "Then we fight for something greater than peace, built on your suffering," he said. "We fight for a future where no one is burned for the crime of existing, where bloodlines are not erased, where a scarred woman can stand beside a king without bringing ruin." He kissed her then, deep, desperate, and full of every unspoken promise. When they parted, Elara felt a fragile thread of hope weave through the despair. The ancient wolves howled as one. The standing stones across the ridge blazed with silver fire, answering her call. But in the south, the horizon glowed with the torches of an approaching army. Elara stood with Draven's hand in hers, the silver light in her scars pulsing steadily. She had survived fire. She had survived rejection. She had survived being sold. Now she would face war itself. Yet, as the drums of the Eastern army echoed faintly in the distance, a final, terrifying thought pierced her heart. What if her power was not enough to save the man who had chosen her? What if love, once again, demanded the ultimate sacrifice? The final battle never came, as anyone expected. 3 days after the silver light awakened fully, the Eastern army reached the frozen plains below the watchtower ridge. Elara stood on the high ground beside Draven, her scarred hands bare to the biting wind. The silver glow had become a steady, quiet radiance, not a weapon, but a beacon. Behind her, wolves from both northern and ancient bloodlines stood united. Before her, thousands of eastern soldiers waited in formation, banners snapping in the wind. Lord Cassian rode forward under a white flag, his face pale but defiant. "King Draven, surrender the girl, and the peace may yet be salvaged." Elara felt Draven tense beside her. She placed her scarred hand over his, drawing strength from the man who had chosen her when the world demanded otherwise. Then she stepped forward alone. The wind carried her voice across the battlefield, soft yet reaching every ear. "I am Elara, of the Silver Bloodline," she called, "daughter of the lost Empress. I was burned, rejected, and sold to buy your peace. But I will not be the chain that binds 2 kingdoms in hatred any longer." She raised both arms. The silver light poured from her scars like liquid moonlight, spreading across the snow. Where it touched, the air grew warmer. Wounds on weary soldiers began to close. Exhausted horses lifted their heads. The ancient wolves howled in unison, a sound so pure it brought tears to hardened warriors on both sides. "I offer you a new choice," Elara continued, voice trembling with emotion. "Not peace built on my suffering, but a future where no child is burned for the blood she carries, where scarred hands are not hidden, where queens are not sold." Silence fell across the battlefield. Then, one by one, soldiers began lowering their weapons. Not out of fear, but recognition. The silver light touched something deep inside them, healing old hatreds and awakening long-forgotten truths. Lord Cassian screamed for them to attack, but his voice was drowned by the sound of steel dropping into snow. Even his own guards turned away from him. Draven stepped up beside her, taking her hand openly before both armies. His voice rang out strong and clear. The North stands with Elara, not as tribute, not as prisoner, as my queen, as the woman who reminded us what honor truly means. The Eastern soldiers began to kneel, not to Draven, not to power, but to the scarred woman who had chosen healing over revenge. Cassian was taken into custody by his own men. Later that evening, in the quiet glow of the watchtower hearth, Elara sat wrapped in Draven's arms. The silver light in her scars had softened to a gentle shimmer. The war had ended not with blood, but with truth. "I was so afraid," she whispered, tracing the line of his jaw. "Afraid that loving you would destroy everything, that I would always be the curse." Draven pressed his lips to her scarred shoulder, kissing every mark with slow reverence. "You were never the curse," he murmured. "You were the light we tried to extinguish, and now you have saved us all." Tears slipped down her cheeks again, but this time they were different, not of despair, but of release. 12 years of pain, rejection, and fire finally found their ending in the arms of a man who had risked everything for her. "I still carry the scars," she said softly. Draven lifted her hand and kissed her palm. "And I will love every one of them. They are the map that led you to me." They held each other through the night as the blood moon finally began to fade, giving way to the soft light of dawn. The kingdoms would need time to heal. Borders would be redrawn. Old wounds between packs would take years to mend. But for the first time in generations, there was real hope. In the quiet hours before morning, Draven knelt before her one final time. "Elara of the Silver Bloodline," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Will you stand beside me not as tribute, not as queen by force, but as the woman I choose every day for the rest of my life?" Elara pulled him up and into her arms, kissing him with all the love, pain, and healing she had finally found. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "I choose you too." Outside, the ancient wolves lifted their voices in a final triumphant howl that echoed across both realms. The scarred servant who had been sold to end a war had instead begun a new era, and somewhere in the distance, under the fading stars, a new dawn broke over a world that had finally remembered the power of a woman who refused to be broken.